Welcome, Stephanie Smith, to Building the Groundwork podcast. Welcome, Stephanie. She's a marketing pro in the industry, but what I really was interested in was she has a great background in marketing, not from the industry. So I would love to learn about her background, and then how she found her way to an equipment dealer, and then now has started her own marketing company, the Grind Marketing Collective. So welcome, Stephanie.
Thanks, Alex. I'm so excited to be here today with you guys.
Cool. So let's start with your background, because marketing in the heavy equipment space has a very limited kind of framework. Typical marketing at a dealership is brochures, hats, and like signage, and that's clearly not what you do or how you learn. So tell me a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I've been in the marketing space for almost 20 years. Tough to say sometimes, but started my career in manufacturing, which is an adjacent blue collar industry. Have a real affinity towards blue collar, and through each of my assignments, always found myself as being a little before my time, which has been kind of cool, but has also, I've had to do a lot to get people to think differently, right? And so through each of those different assignments, I have either helped people build their marketing department for the very first time, or I helped them take their marketing department to the next level, introducing new strategic ways to do things, think a little outside the box, a little less about printed materials and more about ways to really connect with their customers. And through that, I was looking for a change and noticed that there was an opportunity at a dealership near where I live in Kentucky. And they were looking for something a little bit different too. They were looking to really capture the market in a different way, as opposed to just posting stuff online or leveraging print media. And it was a good fit for both of us. They wanted to be able to quantify results as it pertained to marketing. And I had been doing that for years, helping people build workflows behind the scenes, whether that be through HubSpot or Google Analytics or social media.
When you said that many of your assignments were building a marketing department, from zero, is that something that you had experience with, or was it prior you had worked on large teams and you kind of knew like how to structure a department?
Not necessarily. Most of the companies that I found myself at in various blue collar spaces, I was the very first marketing manager, and they had a loose definition of what that was. And so they would say, hey, Steph, this is your baby, build it, and what does this need to look like? And as more and more people got more comfortable with what marketing actually was and how it facilitated opportunities for sales, they would invest more. I mean, you're constantly having to prove the data and what's happening behind the scenes. But as that happened, we were able to build each of the departments to 3, 4, 5 employees and also grow the revenue of the organization.
So you start working in marketing at these blue collar brands. What would you say like their perception of marketing was before you got there? And then how did you open their eyes? Like, what was the perception after you were there? Like, what did they learn?
Yeah, so one of my favorite assignments was a manufacturing firm, and 200-year-old company doing braided textiles, everything from candle wick to braided fish line, right, for deep sea fishing. And typically B2B companies will always say, oh, well, that marketing stuff, that's not really for us. And it just happened to be one of these situations where I needed an internship when I was in college, and they needed somebody. They knew they needed social media. This was 10 years ago. They knew they needed social media and wanted somebody young, which is typically how people it's kind of a gateway, right? Like you pass that along to the youngest person. And so they said, hey, we don't know what this looks like. We know we need something, help us build it out. And so every time that I've kind of been in that setting, it has been really taking what is current, what are current tactics that other industries are deploying, and then adapting them to the setting and then quantifying results. And so on a monthly basis, I would go back and I would report to them what we were seeing in terms of website analytics, what we were seeing in terms of what that meant in terms of conversion of sales, and just building things kind of ad hoc in terms of how to track it. And as that continuously happened, as I continued to report, they're like, okay, let's invest more, let's do more. And some of those companies that I worked with very early on are now investing in marketing in ways that they would have never invested in before. It was a lot of hard work. I'm not going to lie. I got punched in the face a lot. Yeah, it's a joke. It's a running joke. I didn't literally get punched in the face, but I got punched in the face a lot.
For sure. Yeah, I can imagine. I bet those first few months of results probably were met with surprise. Is that true?
And resistance, because we're human. We like what we like, and we want to be comfortable, right? And here's this young kid that says, the way that we're doing it isn't necessarily the only way to do it, and here's a way to do it with faster results that we can actually. You can throttle it, right? You can invest more, or you can decrease the investment based off of what you're seeing.
Yeah, and then I can speak from personal experience because I did work in a marketing function at a dealership before. And I imagine it's pretty similar in the blue collar world. Is that marketing? It seems to be like a check the box department. So it's like, all right, well, we have to staff it. It's many times like an entry level role. But people feel better if the box is checked, but it's a whole nother ballgame if then that individual is making suggestions that on like what the sales department should do. Cause you have these people who are like, hold on a minute. Are you saying that we're doing something wrong? It's like, no, it's not that you're doing it wrong, but like these things can work together in collaboration.
They have to. Really, especially in today's day and age, like you have to have sales and marketing going like this. You can't have them operating in silos.
Right. So that's interesting. So you built how many years of marketing experience, like for these different brands, did you bring with you when you went to Newman Tractor?
Yeah, so I was probably about 13 years into my career when I went to Newman, maybe close to 14.
Nice. And so did you know much about the heavy equipment space before starting at Newman?
No, that was actually a kind of a running joke in the interview. I said, hey, we have a farm, we have a family farm, and I know tractors, but I don't know excavators. And they said, perfect. But the one thing that I'm learning about this industry, even being in 4 years in, is you have to be a continuous learner. You've got to be ready to just consume as much information as possible and share what you know.
Cool. So you got offered the job there, and I think you were mentioning to me before that Newman is different. Like they look at things differently. So their mindset was more of like, hey, we know that we want to change the way we do some things, which is not a typical dealer mindset. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that they were pretty open to the fact that there's this generational shift that's going on. I mean, we've been talking about it for a few years now. It's still going on, and it'll continue to go on, right? And they knew that the customer base was changing. And they also knew that they were investing heavily in marketing at the time and that they wanted to be able to quantify their results. And so bringing in an outsider who had had experience doing that to help connect the dots behind the scenes was something that almost kind of felt second nature to them. Now, they're still a heavy equipment dealer, so there was some resistance in some regards to some of the things that I would have offered or suggested. But for the most part, they knew that they wanted to invest in something different so that they could capture mind share of the future generations.
What kudos to them, because that's they're in the minority there amongst their peers for trying to think differently. What were their marketing dollars being spent on before you?
When I first came in,
Hmm. Yeah.
majority of the marketing dollars was pretty typical of what most dealerships would invest in. It was machinery trader, it was Richardson hats, and Google ads.
Interesting. Yeah, machinery trader, typical playbook. Uh, just a basically a used equipment listing site, right? So that's not necessarily marketing. Richardson hats. Now we do have Heave Richardson hats, so we subscribe to that.
Yes.
And what was the SEO, Google Analytics?
Mm-hmm.
And your background, you're pretty well versed in SEO. Is are there were there different methods to SEO that you were able to kind of bring in, and what do than what typical dealers use SEO?
Yeah, most typical dealers don't really leverage SEO. Um, and I've kind of shifted in terms of how I've been talking about it, especially recently, because SEO is part of the game. The game has shifted a lot in just the last couple of years, and it's more about content right now, content creation and content consumption. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
taking that original foundational marketing tactic of SEO and incorporating that into what is now a more comprehensive strategy as it pertains to content, and really just kind of understanding what your customer, what their questions are and what they is keeping them up at night, and then creating content that is going to help them answer their own questions, because two things are happening right
Mm-hmm.
now. One, people are always shopping, so content never sleeps, so you can always get your answers met. And then the other thing that's changing is where people are shopping. They're not in traditional settings all the time, and that is also true of B2B spaces. And so you need the SEO understanding to help rank and to help answer the questions in a way that will prioritize your responses within Google Analytics.
Yeah, SEO used to mean just do you show up on the first page
Mm-hmm.
amongst like the first three, and most people just pay for it, right? And but you're right, it is uh, the best path is to build an actual strategy around content that will get you to rank high.
Yeah, you need both. I mean, you got to start with an organic game before you start playing the paid game, and then they kind of balance each other out.
So when you came in, did you understand or realize that what the industry perception was of marketing? Like, did you know what you were walking into?
Yeah, so the heavy equipment industry is not much different than manufacturing or agriculture. I'll
Hmm.
actually say that I would have thought that ag would have been about, 10 or 15 years behind the time. And I think that as it pertains to marketing strategies, I think that the heavy equipment industry is a little bit further behind that as well. So I was already familiar with the game that I was getting into, and I think that that's why
Hmm.
it was so attractive to me, is because it was a game that I was used to play and wanted to play it differently.
Yeah, I mean that's rare. So what is you come in, you know what you're getting yourself into. Like, what's the first play that you run? Like, what's the initial strategy?
Yeah, so the initial strategy for me is always the same. It's a discovery process. You have to understand what are the current methods and who are the current players, internally and externally, and then also really get good at listening to what's happening with your customer base, so that you can build
Hmm.
strategies to actually identify what's going on, and then provide solutions to them that they actually care about. There's a lot of noise in today's marketplace, and so being able to cut through the noise is really, really important. So that's the first strategy, is really getting good at understanding who you're talking to, again, internally and externally, and then pitching a strategy that's going to facilitate the needs for both.
And for people listening or watching, Newman is based in Kentucky, has operations in Florida, started as like a used equipment dealer, so multi different brands, but then became a Saney dealer while you were there. Is that right?
They actually were a Saney dealer before I came in. I think 2014
Okay.
was when they became a Saney dealer. Yeah.
Okay. So your primary lines were Saney and then just the lines of used equipment that you typically carry, right? Okay. And what did you learn about the customer journey for Newman customers? Like how they typically found customers, how they nurtured them through the journey and onwards.
Yeah, so I think it was pretty similar to most dealerships in terms of what the original go to market strategies were. And in the heavy equipment industry, it's about relationships, right? But what changed over time and what is continuing to change for all businesses is that relationship doesn't have to begin in person. And so that's where the shift really started to take place, and where we started to pay a lot of attention. And where I would caution people and encourage people to start paying a little bit more attention to is it can be
You've
digital.
touched on one of my favorite topics.
Yeah.
Cause, yes. Yeah, well, because, starting in the industry, I was new. You hear people love to say, this is a relationship business. And that saying kind of drives me crazy. Like, yes, I get it that customers buy from who they like. To me, that saying has always meant like, well, you know what? The customer buys because he likes me. And like I've mentioned that phrase to customers just to get their reaction, and I get a lot of, no, what does that mean? How does that make me money? Like, yeah, of course, I'm not going to buy from somebody I dislike, but customers are motivated on different things. So, but that's just what dealers tell themselves. And I can only imagine. So what you had just said is basically you open their eyes to digital, like building leads digitally. So I can only imagine the uphill battle that you maybe fought there, or maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, again, going back to what we were just talking about, people like comfort, and they like what they know, and they like to be comfortable. And somebody coming in and presenting something that is not necessarily the norm is uncomfortable. And again, it's not to necessarily say that anybody's doing anything wrong. It's just saying that the way that people want to interact with brands across all industries is not necessarily in person anymore. We've been conditioned to expect convenience and consistency. Amazon has ruined us as consumers. We expect that when we're buying from Amazon, but we also expect that when we are engaging with a heavy equipment dealer. And that is something that we've proven time and time again.
Yeah, and I think so. This is the part that I think most like industry vets really miss out on, is that like so when I worked for a dealer that was like fourth in the market. So we weren't Caterpillar, we weren't like number two, and if it's just a quote relationship business, it's really hard to sell. You're reliant on so many things to go right. And marketing, like having a real strategy, embracing digital, all you're trying to do is make it easier to reach customers. That's it. And it just doesn't make any sense to me if you're like in a, like I mentioned, us, like fourth or fifth market position. Like you need other tools if you want to move up in the market. And so it just never made sense, the ones that were clinging to the old comfortable ways, because like the only way to win, to make progress in that type of environment, is just to have more people, have more people in front of the customer, which you can't necessarily do because that's very costly. So it's just like this circular kind of argument to me.
Well, and everybody's got people constraints these days, whether it be on the technician side or whether it be on the sales side or just people in general. Everybody wants something different. And I think that you have to build strategies that pour into the different generational mix. Gen Zs want something very much different than what millennials or boomers or and so on and so forth want from their working environment, but also from their purchasing activities. And so it's creating workflows and funnels, or as I like to call them, infinite loops. I don't want to call it a funnel anymore. Because the goal is to not one and done. It's not a transaction. You do want to build a relationship with people, and you want them to build such a loyalty and affinity towards your specific company and brand that they come back to you for parts, service, and so on and so forth. But the only way to do that is to make sure that you are diversifying your strategies in a way that you are thinking about all the audiences. And I know that that's tough to do because the people who are building strategies, they're one demographic, and the people who might be deploying the strategies are a different demographic, and there might be differing views. And it feels like a lot, but with the digital tools that are in play, I'm running campaigns right now that we have 15 different segments and 15 different messaging strategies for one campaign, because you have to. You have to meet people where they're at, and you have to personalize it so that people actually care and want to engage with your content.
Yeah, that's interesting. The point about who's coming up with the strategy being different than who's executing it, and their viewpoints being different. So, what kind of tactics did you instill there to really to introduce them to digital?
I think it was more just, again, the same approach that I had had at any other organization before. It was, let's try something, let's learn, and let's report back. And a lot of it was, okay, you have to have a content strategy on social. You have to have a content strategy on your website. You have to have a content strategy as it pertains to personal branding, which is a big thing in today's markets.
Sure.
It all sounds very like high level, and it doesn't sound sexy at all. That's a technical marketing term, by the way, right? But it really is just pretty much high level strategies that you then take and you get granular with them based off of what the actual audience is.
Did Newman start quoting machines online, selling online, instead of like the normal channel sales rep to customer?
We did it all. I mean, you have to have a hybrid mix, but yeah, it was to answer people's questions in the format in which they wanted to communicate. And so whatever that looked like, that's how we were doing it. We weren't necessarily waiting for the traditional 8 to 5 window of time to interact with customers. And that was the other thing, right? Like customers don't have time during 8 to 5, especially if they're an owner operator. They're behind the controls of a machine. So you have to make it easy for them to do business with you. And majority of the time that was after traditional business hours.
Interesting. So how would they interact after business hours with the dealership?
Yeah, it would either be through messaging, creating funnels through the various social channels, or messaging just in general through the website.
And who did you have answering these messages? Would it be like a territory sales rep, or was it someone like on the inside, like on one of your teams?
It was marketing.
Interesting. And would marketing close these deals?
Marketing would support.
Interesting experiment. Yeah, and I'm guessing this was successful.
Yeah, I do want to be mindful, especially because I still have such a great relationship at Newman.
Sure.
I'm a pretty transparent person, a pretty candid person. I'll share what I can, and I'll say that it was successful enough to where we made it a full-time role.
That's awesome. It's I was a sales rep for a period of time, and and that our first version of Heave was more of like a trying to enable online sales. So it's something that I'm very interested in. And it's just the climate has there's less like consultative selling in the industry. Like when I started, there was a lot of training around like walk arounds of the machine and value props and all that. And that really declined over the 18 years that I had spent at a dealership, or 16 years. And because, customers, you mentioned, they're busy during the day. But also they have estimating teams. They don't, like, if they get a job and they have to move 1,000,000 yards of dirt for like a housing development or a shopping center, like they have estimating teams. They know like how much equipment they need to move the material. Like sales reps are not sitting in front of customers and saying, okay, you got 1,000,002 yards of dirt. I recommend that it's 500,000 pound excavators and 6 trucks. Like that doesn't happen. And so I've always been in the camp of why not make it super easy. Like you have customers who have bought cat for 20 years. I buy 10 938s a year or whatever it is. Like why not make it easy for them to buy the 10 938s? I don't know.
They expect it anyways, right? They've been conditioned to
Right.
expect that too. It's funny that you
Yeah.
bring that up because that's something that I'm a huge advocate for right now, is building this quote unquote self-service model, self-service sales model, in terms of making it easy for people to do the research themselves and then making the transaction as quickly as possible, because you want them to make the transaction when they're the most excited about it. And a lot of times that happens at midnight when they're most excited about the transaction, and they want to do it because that's when they've been doing the research. And so in order for that to actually happen, it kind of goes back to that notion of a really robust content strategy, because in order for people to do the research themselves, which they want to do, 95% of today's buyers say that they would prefer to do the research themselves as opposed to actually talk to somebody. And then they want to, because they want to feel educated in the process. And then they want to make the transaction as quickly as possible. They don't want the hurdles. So you got to make it easy for them.
Yeah, and also, I'm not naive. I understand the attitude where people feel like it's threatening. It's threatening because I have sales reps, and sales reps don't necessarily like it because they feel like their jobs are going to go away. But it's not the reality. Because if you ride with a sales rep, which I'm sure that you did, their phone is going off constantly. They can only see X amount of customers a day. And, most dealers don't have just an army of people on the ground. So you have individuals like in Florida, like one rep who covers Palm Beach County. It's a huge county. Or one rep that covers Miami. It's unrealistic to think that they can cover that whole area and give the attention to the customers that the customers need without like something like this that helps make their job easier. Like they can work together.
Well, especially because there's so much competition out there today, right? Like everybody has access
Right.
to information, endless information. And what's your point of differentiation? Like this is where I do kind of sound like I talk out of both sides of my mouth. You need a hybrid approach, but a lot of the digital marketing tactics that we're talking about really just further supports the sales reps who are in market, who are beating down doors for a couple of different reasons, right? Like in some regards, and this is actually something that I've kind of, the adversity that I've been met with is most people in the heavy equipment industry think that marketing is fluff. Well, it's not fluff. It is a feeling, right? You want people to feel some sort of way about your brand. You want people to feel some sort of way about Heave and doing business with Heave.
Sure.
So that they can, you want it to be a good feeling, right? So that they keep coming back.
Yes.
And same for dealerships, right? There's so many other people that are lined up to take your business today, and people know who you're doing business with, whether you think they do or not. They know, they can figure it out. So you have to make sure that you are providing enough of a service and a convenience, that they feel good about you and they want to continue to do business with you. That, the digital marketing aspect of it, in terms of cold calling, it just enhances what that is for the sales reps on that initial job site, right? Because I'll give you a stat. 17 years ago, it took 4 impressions or 4 exposures to an advertisement before somebody would make a purchase. That number today is 20 impressions.
Damn it.
No less than 20 impressions.
I'd prefer the 4.
Yeah. So
as a newer company, I'd prefer the 4.
Exactly. So if you're in that camp where you think that you can just have one sales guy that is outside, that's beating down doors, and you're not investing in some of these digital strategies, you're making it a lot harder for yourself to actually garner the business that you need to facilitate your business. 20 impressions.
20. Damn it. All right, I'll have to get with our marketing department and share that stat. I believe it. It's like, is that because there's just so much competition with messaging and people have shortened attention spans? Is that what it is?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the other component of that too is like people forget so quickly now, right? Like you said, short attention spans. And that's why it's so important to make sure that your messaging sticks to where they convert right away. Because a lot of times where the opportunity is lost is because the follow-up isn't there. And the follow-up is just another impression. And that's not 20 of the same impressions, right? Like that is social media, that is emails, that is phone calls, that is in-person visits, that's across the board. Like you can capture the impressions however you want, but it takes a minimum of 20 impressions to actually convert somebody.
Yeah, one of the things that I've learned from doing this is how to simplify the message and how people respond differently. It's really difficult to condense, and I call it economy of words. Just being able to describe what you do to where someone can understand it, but without being 2 sentences. It's just like quick, rapid fire to where it makes sense. That's a really hard thing to accomplish.
Yeah, I'm in marketing, and that's a really hard thing for me.
We just started billboard, like a little billboard campaign recently, and in some of our markets, and we got a picture of a dozer. It just says "dozer down?" ? So like we're proud of that because it's 2 words and it gets a point across, right?
Yeah, if you get into
actually, I'll ask the marketing professor. What do you think of that campaign?
That's good.
How
3 words or less.
How would you score that? All right, there we go.
I'm a big fan of Buc-ee's billboards because they grab your attention whether you want them to or not. Just saying.
I don't think I've seen a Buc-ee's billboard. I'm familiar with Buc-ee's now that they're starting to build in Florida, but I'll have to Google Buc-ee's billboards.
Yeah, potty like a rock star.
Okay. Interesting. So I love hearing your story about how you brought new ideas to the dealership and some different tactics, but you made a difficult decision to start your own business. I think you're 6 months in, 7 months in.
Yeah. So you're right. It was a difficult decision to leave Newman, but it was one where I felt like it was the right next move for me, and given the opportunity in the industry, I felt like there was a lot of different people who were providing marketing services, and everybody needs different types of marketing services. Going back to everybody's got a different definition, and marketing isn't like one silver bullet. There's all kinds of stuff that's associated with it. And when it came down to it, what I'm really good at is strategy, and felt like there was a huge opportunity to help people understand their gaps and their go-to-market strategies and help build plans to capture more market share.
Who are your ideal customers?
People who understand that they need marketing and are willing to invest in marketing, um, and are willing to bring their sales team to the table for that first conversation.
So is this like, are you trying to stay within the construction industry primarily and help like other dealers or OEMs or?
Yeah, that's actually organically happened. I definitely wanted to stay in the industry because I have such an affinity for the industry,
Mhm.
and have had some opportunities with some manufacturing firms, just given the adjacency, but primarily heavy equipment.
What's your main value prop? Like if I was a dealership and you came to me to pitch me your services, what would you tell me?
I would tell you that there's a lot of things that are hidden, sins in the profits, and by understanding what and how everything works behind the scenes will help you improve your bottom line. That's typically where people are like, I'm curious.
I'm gonna kind of rewind because this just came to mind, but and I don't know the answer to this, but I would I would assume that Newman was one of the higher performing Saney dealers, based on their mindset. You know, bringing you in. Did did Saney ever go to them and try to see if you would talk to other Saney dealers and kind of duplicate that marketing playbook across their dealer network?
Yeah, I think that's good practice, anyways. Any OEM should be looking to their top performing dealers and saying, okay, what are they doing and how can we replicate that?
Well, that's pretty good. That's interesting. That's some. It's a gold medal, I guess, that you guys stood out. It's got to feel pretty good.
I'm a weird individual in the fact that I'm not after the gold medals. I truly just want to help, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I felt like there was a real need to provide opportunity to others and understanding what true marketing is and how it can support your business.
Hmm.
If I was after the money, I'd be doing something completely different, probably.
Sure. What what's the hardest thing for you today in starting the business?
So I'm an extrovert, as you probably can tell, and being isolated on a day to day, as opposed to being in an environment where you're constantly pulled into different meetings because of different people. That's been a little tough for me personally.
Hmm.
The other thing is the goal is to provide value to people, and make sure that they understand what the value is, and just making sure
Hmm.
that you're communicating that and you're getting feedback from them. And if they don't really understand how valuable some of the ROI is, then it that can be tough too sometimes.
Hmm. Do you have anyone working with you or today?
Yeah.
What's the team look like?
So this has been crazy. Very early on, we had to hire our first full-time employee. So Aaron Clone, he and I knew each other from, we worked together at a manufacturing firm. And so he
Hmm.
decided to run alongside me, which has been cool. And then we brought in a couple part-time folks to help us in terms of content generation, who are very knowledgeable about the heavy equipment industry, and so they help kick out some good content.
Nice.
Yeah, so we're about four deep.
What are your Oh, cool. What would you say like your important milestones are, like that you've identified? Like, hey, we want to be at this point or want to be here accomplishing this in the next 6 months or a year. Or, like, what are you working towards?
It's funny that you asked that because we had set goals very, very early on, and then quickly realized that we had already achieved those goals. And so, what does the next round look like? And so, being 6 months into it, and looking towards the next 6 months, I'd say that the main goal is to just continue to find and identify the right clients that we can provide the most value for. I don't necessarily have a number on that right now. I kind of personally don't want to put a number on it, because I feel
Yeah,
like in order to do good work, you got to be matched with the right people.
sure. Yeah, numbers. I'm not. I wasn't digging for numbers, but it's just like for us personally, it was, first you wanted to prove the concept. Like we wanted to have customers that enjoyed and saw value in the service, and then for us it was like, can we get open a new market by this point in time? And then it's like, okay, can we open another couple markets by this point in time? So those were like our milestones.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Is there anything surprising to you now being 6 months plus in?
I
Anything that you weren't necessarily prepared for?
There's a lot that you're not prepared for. You did this. You started
Yep.
your own deal, and so just getting into business ownership, there's a lot of things that you don't think about straight out the gate, but quickly realize that you need to know. I think that the thing that is surprising me the most right now, especially in our industry, is that people are becoming more and more aware of marketing, and they're becoming more and more open to non-traditional marketing activities. And so that has been, I wasn't prepared for that because I was prepared for a fight, I'll say.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
it's been more of a, okay, we know we need to do something.
Positive surprise. I think timing is a very underrated element, an underappreciated element for something being successful. And yeah, I think you're right. It's no longer, I think, frowned upon, or like I said, check the box type of activity. I think people have all recognized in this industry how it's needed. They just don't know what to do.
Right. Right. So timing is everything. And I have a question for you.
Sure.
You noticed that in the industry that there was a need, a pain point that wasn't being met, and you decided to shift really quickly. And so what did that look like internally? Because you were still very relatively new with your existing business model. And then all of a sudden you said, well, hey, there's this bigger pain point that is a much bigger issue. Let's go there.
Yeah, it's there were a couple things. The prior like product that was more like digital sales focused and rental, we had spent 2 years. Like that was really hard. We had made like certain tweaks to it, so it wasn't like the same offering the entire time. But part of it was just listening to customers, and like customers would tell us like, hey, this app is cool, but it's only really valuable to me if the dealers that I like are on the other side of it. So like that was important, like feedback for us. And they would then say like, hey, service is my major pain. So if you guys could ever fix that, that would be something that I would need right now, like today. Ironically, the final nail in the coffin and the decision to pivot was after moments of success. And so what happened was, so I kind of laid the framework of what customer feedback had been. But we had a couple of dealers come on and use our technology, and they sold like a couple like $240,000 wheel loaders. And so our team was excited about that. Like, hey, brand new customer, little effort. You guys sold a machine. At that time, we were a subscription business, so we were charging them like $99 a month. And so our team would reach out and say, hey, this is great. How many sales reps do you have working for your dealership? Oh, we have 40. We have 50. Great. Can you get us a meeting with your VP of sales? And let's see how many other people we could bring on. And the client was like, no, if I don't sell something the next month, we're going to cancel. And it was at that moment I knew we were going to die unless we tried service. Because, like, ironically, the value was way lopsided. They sold a $240,000 machine, so the dealership makes, I don't know, between 20 and 30 grand of profit, and they were squawking over $99. And so that was like the final sign to me that we didn't have anything. Like everything that you read about starting a business is like, will customers pay for it? And it sounds like a simple concept, but like here we were providing value, it worked, but the customer wasn't willing to pay for it. And that's a really hard thing to swallow because we had put all this time and effort into it. But, just unfortunately at that time, the answer was no. And there's just no amount of convincing you can do. Like if the customer, i.e. the dealer, wasn't willing to pay for it, they didn't recognize the value, that helped make the decision.
That's interesting how that all came to be.
Yeah. And so that's when it was like, you know what? If customers are telling us that, hey, my biggest pain is service, I actually went back to like some of our early investor pitch decks, and I had service listed like down the road. Like this is how we're going to get our foot in the market. This is what we're going to do. And then down the road, we're going to get into service. And it was like, well, we have no other choice. Let's try service. Customers are asking for it, and if we can't make this other business work, let's just go after it. And luckily for us, like the second that we like launched the service product in the market, it was like a fairy tale. Mm-hmm. And customers were so happy. They never experienced anything like it. Happy to pay. There was never any problem on that front. So it was just then it was full steam ahead.
And people seem to be still very happy with the service.
Yeah, it's been great. It's so rewarding for customers to recognize what you provide and to really love it. So yeah, it's about just marketing, creating more awareness that we exist. It's funny. Most customers will say something like, "I can't believe this didn't exist before," or "How hasn't this existed before?" We just got to learn. They got to learn we exist.
Well, again, it goes back to that expectation, right? Like they can call an Uber anytime they need a ride, and essentially Heave is kind of the Uber for the service aspect of our industry.
100%.
And so,
and that helps.
Yeah, you made it easy.
Yeah, and there's not. I mean, sure, there are certain customers that. Like the old way and are not tech forward. There are certain ones, but by and large, even like your grizzled veterans who are 55, 60 years old who work for these contracting companies, like they've bought stuff on Amazon, they've used Uber before. They've been exposed to this. So it's if they use it in their personal life, it's not that big of a leap to like, hey, instead of calling, what if you just open this app and saw available technicians and book somebody? It's not that foreign of an activity. Mm-hmm. 10 years ago, probably would have been a lot harder undertaking.
It goes back to timing, right? What you just said.
Yeah, 100%.
The time in which you hit the market. People have to be ready for it in some regards. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's a little bit about our background. It was really hard. I mean, it's in terms of surprise, I guess for me personally, resistance was a big surprise because it just made sense. Mm-hmm. And we had talked about it a little bit in this conversation. Like we were helping facilitate transactions quickly. It worked. Like that was one of the surprises to me is like, how can something that works, that provides value, just not be recognized? That was a surprise to me.
Yeah, I follow Alex Hormozy, and he talks about that a lot, right? He talks about whether or not people are actually willing to make the investment based off of what they think are the actual results. And so that barrier in terms of perception and the threshold in which somebody holds value, that's something that has to be understood and articulated very early on. And it's tough when you're
Mm-hmm.
providing a service for the masses versus one-on-one services, right? Because it's easy to
Mm-hmm.
make shifts and make something custom to someone if you're doing one-offs all the time, but that's also not very scalable either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, is there anyone else that you read or look to for inspiration, motivation, just or learnings?
Are you looking to join a book club? Because I'm looking to start one.
I never read more than after I started the company. So yes, I would join the book club,
Awesome.
and I have many recommendations.
Yeah. That's also a running joke because everybody I talk to, it's like, hey, have you read this book? Um, so I follow Alex Hormozy. He's probably one of my favorites. Simon Sinek,
Hmm.
clearly. Marcus
Hmm.
Sheridan, they ask, we answer. That's, man, I subscribe to that. I also subscribe to his book, The Visual Sale, because we're such a visual environment these days that I
Hmm.
quickly believe that video is going to transform the way that the sales cycle actually takes place.
Hmm.
Who else, man? I can send you a list. How about that?
Have you? There's a great book that I love. Clayton Christensen. He wrote The Innovator's Dilemma, but then he had a follow up book. Oh God, I forget it now. But it's about the customer journey, and basically that the premise is that, it's the jobs to be done theory. Have you ever heard of the jobs to be done theory?
No.
So every customer, who they are using is performing a job, performing a function, and it's critical to understand that there's a reason. Like there's a job to be done, and you have to understand that for them to purchase your product or service, they're basically firing their existing provider. And
Interesting.
so it's a really interesting book. I love all of Clayton Christensen's books. Innovator's Dilemma is great too,
I'm going to have to
but those
pick
are
that one
good
up.
business ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we can start a book club.
Yeah. Another one I really like on that same level is Hug Your Customer. Jack Mitchell wrote it like many years ago before CRM systems were
Hmm.
actually a thing, and actually was able to ride out the 2008 recession in retail. Um, Fun
Mm.
fact, I'll consume books from all different industries just because I think that staying
Sure.
abreast of what's going on in other industries helps you to be, more adept in your own industry. But so he came up with a CRM system before CRM systems were a thing and could ride out the 2008 recession and ended up being way more profitable than any other retailer in that time period because he just cared about his customer. He learned about
Hmm.
his customer, cared about his customer, and took care of the customer.
You know, I don't want to gloss over this because I think you're so right. But you've mentioned this a couple times about looking at other industries and applying the concept to the specific industry that you're in. And I think that's where the industry attitude in the heavy machinery world has always been, well, no, we're different. And it's like, no, you're missing the point. It's the concept. Now, the hard work is trying to figure out, okay, now how does that concept apply to this industry and what we're doing? But that's what you can do. I think that's a really important skill, and I'm sure obviously it's helped you immensely. But we look at all marketplaces. What is Airbnb doing? It's like someone from the outside be like, why would you look at Airbnb? They don't do heavy machinery repairs. Well, they're a marketplace. They have certain features within their marketplace that make it easy for consumers. Like there's something that we can apply. Like I've had the good fortune of talking to early Uber employees and asking them how, like when they went into a certain market in a city, how they got their first X amount of users. There's a lot that you can learn from other industries and then figure out how to apply to your own.
Absolutely. Especially when
Hmm.
the industry that you're in is 15 to 20 years behind other industries. They've already
Hmm.
experienced it,
Exactly.
they've already gone through it. and you can learn and help to insulate your business from what may happen in the future, or help
Yeah,
promote and further your bottom line.
absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to mention about the grind for people who are listening or watching?
I mean, I'm just super grateful to be in this space. I'm super excited to talk with you today as it pertains to the grind. If you're looking for somebody who can help you take a look at your go to market strategies, I'm happy to take a look under the hood and make some recommendations. That discovery work is always really exciting. But just super grateful today.
Cool. It was awesome to have you on and learn from your perspective. And I was bummed to hear that it takes 20 impressions though for Heave to get to register with certain customers.
Okay, I will say this though. 20 impressions isn't as hard as you think, friend. If you if you think about all the content that you're already generating, it's repurposing that content, and it's also repositioning it with the boots on the ground. So you've probably got 20 impressions going on right now that you don't even know that are working on your behalf.
Okay. Let's get that content machine pumping.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. So what's the best way to reach you if any potential clients are out there? LinkedIn, email?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn, or you can hit us up at thegrindmarketingcollective.com.
Great. I appreciate your time. It was great to meet you finally and hear your perspective.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much, Alex.